Hi, I'm Jim, and today I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that is taking a look at the various characteristics of fatwood. If you're unfamiliar with fatwood, what fatwood is basically just pine, just pieces of pine that have been infused with pine resin or sap. What makes it so special is that it'll take a spark and create a fire very easily. And so if you've seen any of my videos in the past, you know that one of the things that I like to do is do a spark test with all the knives I get to see how fast or how easily they can start a fire. For the last year or so, I've been using a piece of fatwood that was given to me by a friend of mine, and then just recently I started using a piece of fatwood that I harvested myself, and I found, hey, lo and behold, you know what? The two fatwoods aren't created equal. So with that revelation, what I decided I wanted to do was just take a quick look at different types of fatwood to see, what the characteristics were, if some created fire better than others, which I already know the answer to that. The answer is yes. But just to solidify for myself what the best type of fatwood is, and frankly, whether store-bought fatwood is any good or not, or is it as good as the fatwood that you can find for yourself. Today what we're going to do, I'm going to use my honey badger, which is sort of in the middle in terms of its ability to spark a ferro rod and create a fire. It's also sort of in the middle in its ability to create really good shavings with the spine. And so the reason I'm using this is because I want to mimic real life conditions, or conditions where it's not going to be 100% perfect. And so this being a competent but sort of middle of the road ferro sparking knife, I think this is a good way to go. Today we're going to look at this piece of fatwood, which I've been using in my most recent videos. I harvested this in the Emigrant Wilderness from a root. It tends to be very hard, not very sappy. It does start a fire, but not as well as what I used to use, which was very sappy. I've also got this, I just received this last week from Dan Hoffman, a member of the Dark Timber Brotherhood and the Lords of the Steel. And this is a piece of fatwood that he picked up in an old logging area. And old logging areas are great places to find fatwood, because they'll cut the tree off above the base, and oftentimes, you'll find fatwood at the base. If you've ever cut into a pine tree, you'll notice that in order to heal itself, it excretes resin, and that's basically what happens here. So when trees die, all of that resin, all of that sap that is in the tree, if the tree is still standing, will basically fall to the base of the tree, and so you'll oftentimes find fatwood at the base of the tree and in the roots. Similarly, when a limb is injured, there'll be an accumulation of fatwood there, and oftentimes you tend to find a lot of fatwood at the junction of the base of the tree and the lowest limbs. I've had this stuff for a number of years. It's called Tinder Tin, and it's by Exotac. And what it is, it's basically, they call it fatwood splinters, and it's basically just small pieces of fatwood. I've also got some pieces of fatwood that I'm not going to test, at least not on video, that I picked up myself. Now, I harvested these, I cut into them, I thought they were going to be good, and it turns out they weren't. We'll also be looking at the Duraflame Fatwood. I picked this up at Walmart for $7. And you can see, this is basically a lifetime supply. So, the question is this stuff any good? And lastly, I've got this all-natural fatwood fire starter that I got from Home Depot. I think Lowe's carries the same thing. The thing that I liked about this, or at least the packaging is transparent, so I could see the fatwood, and I could see how much resin each piece had, and I could pick from the bags there to make sure that I got the bag with the best sticks. And so when I talk about fatwood with resin, what you're looking for a nice amber color, right? If you can't take the piece out and smell it, and it should smell like sap or turpentine, at the very least, what you want to find is something with a nice amber color. You can see that this piece of fatwood is, it's just dark. It's got this dark orange. It just looks sappy. As opposed to this piece that I harvested myself, which even though it's very hard, it doesn't quite have that coloring. You can see the piece I got from Dan, you know, again has that nice coloring to it, so this should be a good piece. This Tinder Tin, it does have a good amber color to it, although it is very short, right? And I like, you know, a longer piece of Fatwood is easier to work with. We'll see how I can do with this. And then this is the piece from Duraflame. You can see it's sort of a dark amber color here. You notice this looks sort of dark and wet, looks sappy. This looks really sort of dark and dried up. And then down here at the top, it's not, or what I'm gonna call the top, you can see it's fairly light. So I'm gonna take Shavings all the way down here, focusing on the bottom part here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll use the Honey Badger to take Shavings using the back edge. And you know what I've seen in my previous videos is that this tends to deliver a fine powder. We'll see if that's the case with this particular knife. And you can see this is sort of a real fine powder. You're getting some curls, but not quite what you would want. But it does, and this certainly does contain resin. It smells. It's very pungent. One I got from Dan is here. Let's give that a shot. Now you can see this comes off in long curls, and that's kind of what you want to see. And what I find, you know, that first piece is very hard, almost petrified, and you know, it seems somewhat dry. And this is more sappy. This stuff is going to be a little bit of a challenge. I could certainly feather stick with this and try to start it that way, which maybe we'll do. This is probably not the best way to use this tinder. And now you can see why I prefer a longer piece. I'm just not sure these shavings are going to be adequate enough to start a fire, but we'll see. Now I like the way that's coming off. Whether it's going to start a fire or not, I don't know, but it's long, it's fluffy. One of the things you need to be careful of when you're buying these pieces of Fatwood from Home Depot or Lowe's is, you know, just make sure you get the ones that are 100% natural. Sometimes they'll put you know, kerosene or something to help. Okay, that was pretty easy. That came off very, very easy. The one thing I should caution is, you know, the more I use this ferro rod and this knife together, the better I'm going to get at doing it. So that might slightly bias the comparison. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to angle the knife slightly down. I'm going to come at it from this direction so that I'm not messing this pile up over here. There we go. Now that took a while. It's about what I expected, though. Oh, that wanted to go. So did that. There we go. Now I'm not convinced yet that it's not my technique. that's causing the difference here, but we shall see. There we go. That was a lot harder than I expected, but given the fact that it was so tough to get really good, and you can see how well this is burning. So it's got, you know, it's got resin in it. It's burning very well, but it was very hard to light because of the size of the shavings. There we go. That's burning well. Wow. That's burning really well. I am really surprised. I was expecting this stuff with all the amber color and all the resin that it seems to have to do better. But I guess what's going on is the curls are thicker, and I think that's impeding, I think it's impeding its lighting ability. And you can see it's smoldering there. There we go. Wow. That took some effort, but I mean, it's obviously got good resin content. I mean, you can see how well it's burning. Okay, so let's give this another shot. So now what I'm going to do is use the blade to make thick shavings, which should light up easier. And you can see what I mean by thick shavings. I mean, these are paper thin. Now, the one thing that I'm noticing is that the harder the Fatwood, the easier it is for me to get those really thin scrapings. I mean, these are thin, but they're thicker than when I got here. And of course, the shape of the wood, yeah, it makes a difference as well. Tinder Tin, I think it's going to be difficult to do that with this, just because of its size. Yeah, that's just going to be difficult. I don't even want to do that. What I will do, however, is maybe try to come up with some feather sticks. Which, yeah, I am not very good at feather sticking. It's just it's too small for me. Now, if I was in the backcountry and this is all I had, well then yeah, I would make do. If I couldn't find any other Fatwood out there, I would make do. But I can tell you now, this is not my preference. And you can see these pieces are pretty much all over the place in thickness. There we go, that's a little better. Next up is the Duraflame. And then lastly, the Home Depot piece. Alrighty, let's see what we got going on here. That was pretty fast. And that's about 7 seconds of burn time. Well, I am just all sorts of surprised. And it, you know, these are thicker pieces than this, so that makes sense, but still. There we go. So that was about 27 seconds of burn time. So even though it was a little bit more difficult for me to start, and the reason again is because the shavings aren't as thin, it burned 3 times as long because of the resin content. There we go. Now this I would expect to burn longer because I've got those bigger shavings in there. And that's about 30 seconds, and it has no, I mean, it doesn't look like it's going out anytime soon. And again, that's because I've got those big splinter pieces in there. This is the Duraflame. It was fairly easy. And I'm getting better at using the honey badger to do this. And that's about 30 seconds of burn time. Doesn't seem to be burning as long as the Tinder Tin, but again, it's got thinner shavings. And lastly, the Home Depot. So the pieces that are infused with more Fatwood, also the pieces that are thicker, are burning longer, which is pretty much what you would expect. I'm not so confident in my abilities that I can say for sure that I'm getting consistent sparks. So what we're going to do, I've got my Phobos MKB7. So the MKB7 is basically, it is the best fire starter that I have, and so we'll see. It typically will light up in one. Let's do the thick shavings. It will typically start a fire in one spark. Well, one thing that is consistent is the more resin, the slightly thicker the pieces are. That should be good. Okay, back to the Duraflame, which continues to surprise. Hard to judge accurately. These are fluffier than all the rest. I think that's about right. And obviously these bigger pieces are so much easier to deal with. Now these are big and fluffy. Yeah, those are fluffy. Now this is interesting. So, same diameter, but because of the characteristics of the Fatwood, I'm getting I'm getting a different result. So with this stuff, which is very resinous, I'm getting not only wide shavings, but they're extremely fluffy. With this, which is less resinous, not as wide, probably because I don't have as big a piece, but not as fluffy, but still fairly fluffy. The Tinder Tin, forget about it. It's just not something that's going to work for me, at least in terms of getting the initial spark. The great thing about these is you could split these into smaller pieces and they're essentially matches, and they'll burn forever. So once you get something like this lit, you take a sliver of this, drop it in, and you've got a fire for probably a good 45 seconds, if not longer. So, and this is the piece I got in the mail, and you can see it is also very fluffy. And of course, this is the last piece. It's the hardest one, it's the thinnest, and it's also the widest. Got my MKB7, which I can usually start a fire with one stroke of the ferro rod. Yep. It's about 10 seconds of burn time. This is what Dan sent me. There we go. That's good stuff. A little more practice in getting thinner shavings, and I think I should be able to get it going up in one. Now this may be a challenge. Yeah, because I've got these bigger pieces. Let me swing these around. Trying to get the smaller pieces towards the front. Bigger pieces back here. There we go. That's what I needed to do to get those thinner pieces towards the front. But as we've seen, I mean, because I've got these thicker shavings, this is going to burn forever. You know, if you took one of these, split it down the center, and now you've got, you know, you've got a match that'll burn. Jeez, no idea how long it'll burn, but it'll burn for quite a long time. Okay, now we've got the Walmart stuff, which, you know, has really surprised me so far. Wow, that was pretty good. Now, it's interesting though, right? For whatever reason, and it's supposed to be natural, but of all of these here, this one actually smells like it's got some sort of chemicals in it. It's not supposed to, you know, but it's burning really black, and frankly, it smells. But it does really well, that's for sure. And lastly, the Home Depot. Yep. Well, I guess this is burning really black too. You know, this one doesn't really smell. This is not really giving off much odor. This one really smelled, really burned black. It was the one that I noticed the most. I'll go back and watch the video. Maybe they all burned black. They probably did. But the Duraflame is the one that, you know, seemed to give off that almost chemical smell. So that was really interesting, and it certainly didn't pan out the way that I thought it would. You know, I thought that the more resin, the easier it would be to start a flame, but that didn't really seem to be the case. I guess the conclusions that I can draw are that, you know, the harder the fatwood, the thinner the shavings, or the easier it's going to be to get really thin shavings, and that thin shavings are important to getting your fire started. Now, where the resin seemed to come in is essentially in the duration of the fire. The more resin, the longer the fire, it seemed. This actually performed better than I thought it would, again, because of the ease that I was able to make really thin shavings. The piece that I got in the mail from Dan Hoffman, that performed basically as I expected. The Home Depot Fatwood did not perform to my expectations, at least initially. I thought that you know, this was going to start fire and maintain the fire like nobody's business. Once I got a handle on how to properly create thin shavings with this, it did much better. But out of the gate, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But, you know, that said, this is going to be perfectly fine. So if you go out and you buy those Fatwood pieces from Home Depot, you can rest assured that you can take this out. It'll be perfectly fine. This Duraflame stuff, you know, I don't really know what to make of this. This actually performed better than I thought it would initially, because I thought the Home Depot brand, because it obviously has so much more resin in it, would perform better, and it didn't. You know, this first couple tests, this probably outperformed it. Presumably because I got thinner shavings, because it's drier and harder. That's my guess. The one thing about this is that it did give off that that strange chemical odor, and you know, it's not supposed to have chemicals. I don't know what that is, if that's just the type of pine they're using. I'm not really sure. But I would probably be less likely to go out in the backcountry with this, just because you know, I don't want to smell up the place. But you know, if you're not concerned with that, again, this is going to be perfectly fine for starting a fire. These Tinder Tin pieces, again, not really my bag, but that really has to do with the size and the fact that you've got so little material to work with. The natural piece that I got in the mail, this performed pretty much as I expected. You know, this is the real deal, and you know, it's something that, you know, any one of us can go out and harvest for ourselves, and it's going to be perfectly fine. So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was fun to watch. You know, rewatch it, draw your own conclusions. Thanks for watching, and be safe. Here's another piece of fatwood that I harvested myself from the Sierra. It's not a great piece. I was, you know, digging around some roots, and I dug into a piece, and I cut it right here, and I could see, oh, there's fatwood. Doesn't look like much on the outside, but when I split it open, you can see all in here. There's all of this amber color. So that's actually going to be a fairly decent piece. Once I get this outer layer of bark off, a piece of fatwood like this, even if this isn't as rich on this side, you know, a piece of fatwood like this could last you years, you know, depending on how often you go out. How cool is that? What do you know? This is probably the best piece that I've tried all day. Oh, look at that, it's still burning. Wow, who would have thought?